Welcome to... How the heck do you pronounce that?
Caelid.
Caelid.
Salad.
Caelid.
Red, fungal, festering land where everything wants to kill you.
That's pretty accurate. You win this one.
Of course I win.
Thank you for joining us for How the Heck Do You Pronounce That?
Hi everyone. So this video is about something that I've been thinking about for over a year now. I've been wanting to store my beads and such in a more aesthetic way. Usually I get those little plastic containers and sure they're good for organizing, but they're really nothing to look at. So I got the idea of doing something a little more whimsical, magical, kind of like potion bottles. So this past year, I've been finding here and there glass bottles and vases and little jars, looking more at the silhouette of the vessel instead of the outside design, since I was going to cover it up anyway. Considering I'm currently still playing the famous video game Elden Ring, I figured, why not start there? So for this first container, I figured I'd do something inspired by the game. Now the game is a plethora of inspiration when it comes to very cool visuals. But of course I had to only pick one for the moment. And I figured the little organic goblin in me wanted to do something organic. So I decided to do a jar inspired by that red, poisonous, fungal festered land where everything wants to kill you, Caelid. Now before we start this video, I'd like to just give one warning to people who'd like to cover glass items with polymer clay. Depending on your glass, how thick or thin, what type of glass it is, I've always had a habit of letting the glass cool slowly. So a good thing to practice is when you're covering polymer clay with glass and you're baking it in the oven, after the time is done, turn off the oven, leave the item in the oven, and just open the door just a little crack so it can ventilate. Because the oven is insulated, it'll hold on to the heat a little longer and the glass is able to cool down a lot slower. Now, since I've been doing this, I've never had an issue of any glass cracking or shattering. So I hope this tip helps you out. And with that, let's get to the video. I hope you enjoy. If you suffer from trypophobia or fear of closely packed holes, this is not the video for you. Please refrain from watching. Thank you. To start this project, I simply started covering the vase with Mod Podge and layered on crumpled up pieces of red tissue paper. For the first part of the vase, I mixed gray and pearl white clay. I put a base of the clay in a shape that I was going to put all the little holes in. For the holes, I started with round clay circles and then flattened them on this base. I then put a smaller piece of red clay and pushed it into the light gray one, making the hole. Originally for this project, I was going to use all colored clays and not paint anything the color it's supposed to be. I was then just going to weather it. As you'll see later on in this video, that plan didn't quite work out. However, I am very grateful that I did have this plan originally, because the whole part of the vase I never painted, and it saved me a lot of time. In the next part of the vase, these are fungi that grow on dead trees. I added the white, but later on this did not matter at all since I ended up painting over it. It was a complete waste of time, but these things happen. It's interesting to see how a project changes from its initial plan. Next up is a skull. Originally, I was not going to add this to the vase, but in this particular part of the game, there are these giant skulls everywhere, and it just seemed wrong not to include them. The skulls are very pitted in the game, so I just stippled the surface using a multiple amount of sizes of the ball tool. After the skull was completed, I started adding the twisted roots. I used a multitude of colors for the clays, but again, I ended up painting it in the end, so this was a complete waste of time. I made long tubes using the clay, and then twisted it to give myself a little shortcut and the texture of the wood. I then continued the wood to where the first fungus resided. The larger table fungus were made in a very similar way to the first ones. I just made a wider base. And again, I added the white, which really had no meaning in the end, since I ended up painting it. Off camera, I made these little spikes and then baked them, so I could just insert them into the fresh clay. There's this weird little tree fungus that I wanted to add simply because of its uniqueness. I made 2 little branches and gave it its wood texture. For the many branches of this fungi, I used a thin jewelry wire and added a little bead of clay on the ends. After everything was baked, I used metallic paint to accentuate the lake of rot. In this case, it was more of a river of rot. I added black on the edges and then blended it inward. I then added a little gold and pearlescent paint to add some highlights. And here is where I made a mistake of thinking that I could just weather this and be done. I wasn't really thinking when I was first making this vase, but there are so many crevices and so many things sticking out that are a little delicate that I just couldn't get around them to wipe off the wash. I gave up pretty quickly and decided that I was just going to have to bite the bullet and paint. For the fungus, I painted a darker red under the mushrooms and then dry brushed a lighter color. I painted the top of the mushrooms in a cream color instead of a white because I thought the white would be too harsh against everything else. I then weathered everything with a light gray. With the wood, I started with a dark brown and then dry brushed lighter brown and a cream white. On the cactus-like fungi, I dry brushed it with the white and the pearlescent paint. Once all the painting was done, on the river of rot, I painted on a super high gloss sealant to make this area look really wet. And with that, I was finally done. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time.
Subscribe!
Yay!